Good morning, Bimblers, and welcome to episode 3 of our Pennine Bimble. And you join me here at the junction in Sollom for the third time. However, today we're actually going to cross it and head over there to Southport. So let's stop messing about and let's bimble.
Things to show me, but life just keeps turning back to the way things were before. All new this time, you would still see all that became attached from the way things were before. It just proves to me how it's meant to feel. We have a motive, we have the time. We were meant to lead extraordinary lives. It changed with time. You still know me. We just keep facing back to the way things were before. Plainly show what we're meant to know. We have a motive, we have the time. We were meant to lead extraordinary lives. Edged over lines, days keep moving, but time just keeps falling back to the way things were before. Just proves to me how it's meant to feel. We have a motive, we have the time. We were meant to lead extraordinary lives. It just proves to me how it's meant to feel. We have a motive, we have the time. We were meant to lead extraordinary lives.
Behind me is the Sluice, and if you remember in our last episode 2.5, we went on a detour off National Cycle Route 62 and we went down the Ormskirk branch line and we visited somewhere called Martin Mere. And I told you that Martin Mere used to be the biggest lake in England until they drained it. And this is how they drained it, with the sluice. So who did they task with completing such a feat? Someone from the Hesketh family? Kind of, a relation of theirs, a Thomas Fleetwood. He's a cousin of Sir Peter Hesketh Fleetwood. And in the last episode, I misinformed you. I said that Sir Peter Hesketh Fleetwood got the Fleetwood part of his name from his mother's maiden name, which isn't correct. He actually got the Fleetwood part of his name from his father's mother's maiden name. So his nan's maiden name on his dad's side. Anyway, Thomas Fleetwood was the man that was tasked with draining Martin Mere, and he built this, the sluice. And in those days, it was all gravity based. And they just used the lay of the land to drain Martin Mere, which there isn't much land to lay. Martin Mere is only 2 metres above sea level, and it was very prone to flooding. And in 1755, it did flood. The sea broke in, and all the fields around here flooded again. and basically Martin May filled up. And at that point, Thomas Fleetwood was long gone, dead. So it was left to his cousin, Sir Peter Hesketh Fleetwood, my hero, the inventor of Fleetwood, the man that designed my favourite chip shop. He came in and sorted it out. But obviously it silted up again. And the workings all got covered in silt. And it stopped draining. And it was at that point that they decided that they needed a little bit of mechanical help. And they built 2 large pumping stations. One by the River Alt, just near Formby in that direction, and one here at Crossons. In fact, they sometimes call this the Crossons River, which is ridiculous because it's a canal at best. It's a drainage ditch. There's no river about it. It's a canal. Get your facts straight, will you? A company was set up called the Crossons Drainage Board, which eventually was took over by the council and then eventually by United Utilities. They built a new pumping station in 1958, and while they were digging it out, they found something rather interesting in the dirt. A big boulder of Cryfall granite. That's granite that comes all the way from Dumfries in Scotland. And apparently, 18,000 years ago, it rolled all the way from Scotland down a big ice glacier as the Ice Age ended. And it ended up here, just outside of Southport. And in 1958, they dug it out and put it outside the pumping station. Those kinds of rocks are called erratic rocks. A little bit like the episodes of this series. Let's bimble. This is Hesketh Park, and it was donated to Southport by the Reverend Charles Hesketh. He owned this land, and he was also the little brother of Sir Peter Hesketh Fleetwood, my hero. He donated the land in 1868, and they built this wonderful park with a greenhouse and lots of gardens and a lake with some fountains and a playground for the kids and a cafe. If you bring cash, it's cash only. I just try to get a drink, but I only use digital money these days. It's a great place to visit if you want to get away from the seafront and give your wallet a rest. But we want to see the cut and thrust of Southport, so we're going to go right to the pier. Let's bimble. Well, Bimblers, it was quite difficult finding a place to do this little piece to camera. It's very busy in Southport today. There's music blaring, and we can't have that on the channel. I'm not getting a copyright strike. I only use my own music on this channel. I found there's a nice little spot by the bowling greens. It's very quiet. Just a few old fellas throwing a few bowls around. But we are quite close to Pleasureland. And if you remember in episode 1, we went to Blackpool Pleasure Beach. And I told you all about Alderman William George Bean and his mate John Althwaite. Well, they made such a success of Blackpool Pleasure Beach that they opened Frontierland in Morecambe. And they were such a success that they opened Pleasureland here in Southport. It was opened in 1913, and when Mr. Bean died, he passed it down to his daughter, who'd married a Mr. Thompson, so it was owned by the Thompson family. And the Thompson family still own Blackpool Pleasure Beach, but they don't own Pleasureland anymore. That was sold to a Norman Wallace in 2006. And Frontierland is long gone, rest in peace. Southport hasn't always been called Southport. It was originally called South Hawes, and it all sprang into life in the late 1700s. That was when all the rich people in the UK got a little bit obsessed with sea bathing and drinking seawater. That didn't last long because it's disgusting. But the bit that stuck around was the sea bathing bit, because we still do that today. All the people that used to come to Southport, or South Hawes, used to come on packet boats down the Leeds-Liverpool Canal. And a man called William Sutton seen the potential, and he was ridiculed for it. He opened a hotel on what's called Lord Street now. And the people around South Hawes called it Sutton's Folly. And they thought he would go out of business. But it went from strength to strength. And by the 1820s, 20,000 people a year were coming to Southport, which might not seem like a lot. Maybe you get 20,000 people here in one weekend now. But back then, that was before people had the motor car. That was before the railways. People were coming down the canal on packet boats or on horses and carts. In 1860 they built the pier, and it's actually the UK's oldest iron pier. And it's the UK's second longest, the longest being Southend Pier. It was originally 1,340 metres long. But they had a few storms, and of course a few fires. For some reason piers always seem to burn down. And that left it at a puny 1,108 metres. Just over a kilometre. Nothing. But if you've ever been to Southport, you might be asking yourself, Kieran, why would people come to bathe in the sea at Southport? Or why would they build a pier if the sea never comes in Southport? And these days, that's correct. You have to walk miles to get to the sea now. But back in those days, the sea used to come right up to the pier entrance. That was where the seawall was. And if you remember in episode 1, I told you about how they altered the course of the River Ribble, and that stopped the tide coming in St Anne's. Well, it did exactly the same thing in Southport, but to a much larger degree. Now the sea only comes in about 500 metres down the pier, and it doesn't come in very often. I've seen it happen once where the sea came up to the seawall, but never again. And today, it's about 2 miles that way. But I think we should bimble to our last portage and see if the sea's coming in there. Let's bimble.
You'll find in time, I'll never let it go. You'll find it's right, I'll only ever know how to speak my mind. I'll only ever know how to speak my mind. To me it was a long mistake. To me it was a golden handshake to reapply those lazy arms in my heart. spend it to relocate, right from the break to the start. Over time, clouds kept the light from those eyes. Still, love grown consumed, and you know I'll never let it go. You'll find in time, I'll never let it go. You'll find it's right. I'll only ever know how to speak my mind. I'll only ever know how to speak my mind. Over time, clouds kept the light from those eyes. Still, love grown consumed, and you know I'll never let it go. You'll find in time, I'll never let it go. You'll find it's right. I'll only ever know how to speak my mind. I'll only ever know how to speak my mind. My mind.
Well, Bimblers, we reach Ainsdale, and this is our last chance to see the Irish Sea, at least in this series of videos. Obviously we'll be bimbling to loads of seaside places, I can't help myself. But in our Trans-Pennine bimbles, the next coast is the North Sea, over near Hull, on the other side of the UK. God knows when we're going to get there. Ainsdale is famous for having a pontins, just like Prestatyn. But the difference between Prestatyn and Ainsdale is the head office of all the pontins. And it also comes under the jurisdiction of the Liverpool Echo. So anything that goes wrong ends up in the Liverpool Echo. That's anything from hairs in the fridge, to families fighting, to a woman dying in a chalet. I'm sure it's not that bad, but I think I'll stick with my tent. Ainsdale is also home to something called Toad Hall, or Lizard Hall as it should be called now. It's got a great big lizard painted on it. It was originally built in the 1920s as some guest houses, but it was all knocked through and made into a nightclub called Sands. But in the 1980s it was boarded up and abandoned. That was because, according to its landlord, he was afraid of people taking drugs in there, and he was afraid of rave culture coming into his nightclub and getting him in trouble. So he just decided to close the club. It seems a little bit unbelievable, but it was boarded up for 20 odd years, and it's still boarded up now. But it had a little bit of a facelift in 2021. An artist named Paul Curtis painted this rather fine lizard on it. You might recognise some of Paul Curtis's artwork if you've been out in Liverpool, because he painted some angel wings on a brick wall in the Baltic Triangle. And that's where all the girls like to have the pictures took for Instagram. What you've got to do is put your hand on your hip, do the pose, get the picture, upload it to Instagram, and then you can be like all the other girls. Paul didn't paint the lizard because he's a big lizard fan. The lizard actually lives round here. It's a rare sand lizard. In fact, it's the male sand lizard. That's why it's so colourful. And apparently they live all over the dunes here, down in Formby, here in Ainsdale, and down there in Southport. They're very shy, so you're unlikely to see them. But I wonder, are they the same lizards that gives Ormskirk its name? If you remember in episode 2.5, I told you that Ormskirk gets its name from the Old Norse word orm, meaning worm, which means monster, snake, sea serpent, or lizard. and kirk meaning church. So it's effectively lizard church. Are the sand lizards the lizards they were on about? Who knows? Answers on a postcard or down in the comment section. It's time for me to mosey home.